Ottavino Corporation is a family business. I'm third generation in the business. And as you see, we've been stone specialists since 1913. My grandfather, Admiral Ottavino, who you see in the center with the white hat on his knee, actually founded the company. And he was born in 1887 in Boscoreale, Italy, to Giovanni Ottavino and Florence de Casso. And Boscoreale is a little bit north and west of Pompeii. And this would be a typical, on the right, Italian country villa that would have been built in the area of Boscoreale, and which this room was actually brought to the Metropolitan Museum of Art where it lives today. And my father was always very fond of bringing us to see this room. My grandfather didn't actually come from the family that would own such a villa, but he certainly did appreciate it. The Boscoreale area suffered the same effects of the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in about 79 AD. And so much of these buildings were preserved or as a result of that. Actually, my grandfather, pardon me, Admiral Ottavino, was not the oldest son, and in the time of primogeniture, his father's post, which was as a municipal civil engineer, would go to his older brother. And so in 1906, he and his sister Albina emigrated to New York City, coming through Ellis Island at that time. My mother's family actually came through Castle Clinton, so we really spanned the gap. And so when he came to America, he became a stone carver with the monuments industry, which was a thriving industry in at the turn of the century. And while he was living on Sullivan Street in Greenwich Village, he married Consuela Maria Pisani, my grandmother, who was originally from Boscoreale, which was just sort of a little bit east of Boscoreale. And then 1 year after marrying him, in 1912, she lived on 14th Street near the water, he opened the A. Ottavino Corporation or Memorial Studios. And again, we see Adamo. So the Stoneworks was later moved in the 1930s to our present location in Ozone Park, Queens. And this is a view of the Stoneworks. And Consuelo and Adam had 3 boys, John Vincent, Adam George, and Gerald Ottavino. And they grew up in the company and went on to run the company and to own it. So part of their work, or the majority of the work in the early years of the firm, was really in private monuments and mausoleums, which my grandfather started out doing. And due to these basically strikes that were being held, that's why he founded his own company, so he could continue to work. And so many of the monuments were for the Italian-American community, but we also, as I mentioned earlier, had very many Irish people. And so we really created monuments that reflected the heritage of the people and the families that were burying at that turn of the century time. My father, who designed this mausoleum, the Gothic style, one of his favorites after the Egyptians, my father went on to study architecture at Catholic University of America, where he became an architect. But at the time this was happening, the 3 boys that Consuela and Adamo had, John Vincent, Adam George, and Gerald Anthony, they became a very strong partnership. And as a result of my father studying architecture, the firm moved into larger scale projects and the build of buildings as well. And here we're, because of our work in monuments though, the New York City Parks Department asked us to work on the restoration of monuments in the cities, in the city. So the Pulitzer Fountain was one of our early works. And here this was truly a restoration in the sense that the fountain bowl, which we just saw at the top, cracked, and so a new bowl had to be made. And here you see my father, just to lend scale, in the quarry where the stone has been excavated, quarried. And here you see the piece finished and installed. Interestingly, because of the firm's diversity, I was able to pursue my love, which is conservation. And the work of the Pulitzer Fountain was by Carl Bitter, who did the Pomona statue. Years later, this is 2016, we were commissioned by the city to do the conservation of another Carl Bitter work, which was the Rebecca Salome Foster bas-relief. And this today can be seen in the Manhattan Supreme Court. Rebecca Salome was an early reformist for prison care, and she really sought to see the prisoner in a more humanistic way. And so our public works also brought us into more diverse materials, and so we did the conservation of the Bethesda Fountain, which is bronze, as well as the stonework around it. And then this also became my introduction into the Stoneworks. I was in college at NYU and graduated with a degree in very relevant dramatic literature. But after work, I felt I would like to work in Stoneworks. But I said to my father, I don't want to just, push the paper, so to speak. I really want to do what we do. And so I had the opportunity to work on these fountains. Here, there's a detail of the little encaustic tiles that actually were manufactured for us by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And in this process, of course, there are some amusing stories. I had graduated, and this was my first summer working, and I was biking to and from, because we were restoring the National Maine Monument and the Cherry Hill Fountain, and so I would just take my pail and my tools and go back from site to site to not only do some work, but to see how the men were doing. And I'm biking through the park one day, and these two fellows that I'd gone to NYU, they're like, Kate? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm going from the Maine Monument to the Cherry Hill Fountain. And they said, well, look at you. You've got pails and chisels. And they're like, last time we saw you, you were aspiring to be Rita Hayworth. So, well, how the mighty have fallen, or at least diversified. But anyway, so what we were looking at here is the Italian fountain in the Wildlife Conservation Society, the former Bronx Zoo, or AKA the Bronx Zoo. And this was a beautiful project. And so this entailed a lot of our conservation crew skills. Here's the national, well, I didn't say, but the Robert Morris Hunt base of Rockport granite, we carved the entrance so that they could put in an elevator. The National Maine Monument is a really interesting project, and it's interesting because it is really representative of the Italian-American community, as well as, obviously, the American war with Cuba, but, or Spain, I should say. But the Attio Piccirilli was the sculptor for this monument, and he collaborated with Harold McGonigal, which is very common at the turn of the century to have architects and sculptors collaborate in the creation of a monument. And so here, this is one of my early projects, that we disassembled the whole monument and then recreated it, rather rebuilt it. And here we did the same thing with the Fireman's Memorial at Riverside Park. And so, Attio Piccirilli is a fascinating person and well worth a lecture, and there have been such lectures on his and the work of his 5 brothers. They were all artists, but they really earned their living carving the monuments, and they actually carved the Lincoln Memorial for Daniel Chester French in Washington, D.C., as a work everyone would know. Then here we have the William Cullen Bryant. You'll see that a lot of our projects involve bronze and stone because of the nature of the public work. Here we have a picture of, in the far left, your left, is my father, George Ottavino. To his right is my uncle, Jerry Ottavino. And in the forefront is Joseph Bresnan, who long-term, he too is half Italian, monuments Director of Art and Antiquity, and he's receiving, on behalf of the National Maine Monument, an early Municipal Art Society Preservation Award. Ken Farragut is giving it to him. But the Municipal Art Society is significant that they were early people, early institution to recognize preservation and excellence in the field, which was really helping to bring it to the forefront. Here is a beautiful monument that is the Farragut Memorial in Madison Square Park. This was originally in bluestone, the base, and then we were asked to carve it in granite because it had deteriorated. So this is the Soldiers and Sailors Monument in Riverside Park again. Here we recarve the capitals, or carve new capitals, because they were so deteriorated. Then we also do smaller scale monumental work. This is a City Hall plaque commemorating the restoration, and different scales of monuments. This is the World War Memorial in Southampton, Long Island. I always find these World War memorials so tragic because they all assumed it was the last such war. Wish we could say that. But of course, as I was saying, we as a company have moved forward with the times and with the design concepts of the times. And this is the Teardrop Park project in Battery Park City. Here, all of this stone is dry laid, which means no mortar, and is very meticulously hand set and crafted, and was laid all out at the quarry, and then disassembled and assembled again in the park. And this actual technique or approach or methodology to constructing is also something that we have pioneered to some extent in the preservation field. But in context of contemporary public monuments, this is the Eternal Flame Memorial in Battery Park, and from the 911. The Korean War Memorial, also in Battery Park. Lewis and Clark Memorial in Kansas City. And most recently, the Women's Rights Pioneer Memorial in Central Park, which I believe Meredith Bergman was part of your series, Lisa. So that was exciting to get to know her and her family. The Mother of Africa Chapel at the National Shrine on the campus of Catholic University. And this is the St. James Church, where this church has had several iterations, but in this project, we removed all of the tesserae flooring and installed all new floors. This is the Fontaine Chapel, which is in Fort Tryon Park. It's the Cloisters, and this was brought over from Spain by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and then we rebuilt all the pieces, actually rebuilt the chapel. And this is one of the early works that the Metropolitan Museum of Art tapped us for because of our work doing city public monuments. Here's the Brooklyn Borough Hall, which is, of course, dear to us. We were all born in Brooklyn. And this is the interior here. We recreated the two missing staircases and the upper tier of columns that had been missing. This is the New York Historical Society, where we do some things that are unusual in the preservation field. In this instance, we created two new openings that used to be windows that are to the right and the left of the door, the main entry, so that the public could have more, have greater ease of access. Columbia University, where I enjoyed going to school for many years. Here we did the plaza. We moved all the steps, we built the foundations, put new steps in. So our work is, sort of can be pretty large scale. Here we are again at the Manhattan Courthouse. Again, we did the same with the removal and the resetting of all the steps. This is the Whitney Museum, and one of the wonderful things about being a family business that we've grown in 1997, actually, my father had my sister and my two sisters and myself take over the building of the business, and my sister Sally was married to Mohammed El Kordi, and they both met at Catholic University. And he's an architect, engineer, and he really has helped our company grow in its engineering capacity, its rigging capacity. And here you're seeing an example of the scaffolding that he designed to enable us to literally remove every stone from the building, bring it back to our stoneworks, and then clean, so we could clean in natural light, simulating the conditions of the field, and then recut anchor holes and put all the pieces back onto the building, which we did literally in 6 months while the museum was in operation. So kudos, Mohammed. And then one of our early buildings that was really a fully built building by ourselves is the St. John's Cloisters. And this happened under my father's watch. And then one of the wonderful things about being a business that's been around for over 100 years is that we've lived many of the developments in the industry, in stone industry, architecture, and engineering developments. And so this is the Dello Schaffito building for Columbia University, where it's all a little bit like Lukmano hands, but every single stone is a different shape and needing different anchors, and it was just really quite a challenge. And again, we did that in record time. So it's been good. And then we also have, in terms of our growth and development, because someday we very well may be coming back to restore that building. So to understand how it was built and the technology is very valuable. Here, this is the interior of building Crescent Street in Long Island City. And it was interesting for its the stone is from China, for its design aesthetic with all of these grooved, fluted panels. I was talking a little bit earlier about methodology and how we as a company have grown in our understanding of technologies that are involved. So here, this is the Temple of Dendur. About 15 BC, it was built during the reign of Augustus Caesar for Nubian chieftains whose sons had drowned in the river, princes. And this temple was gifted to the United States and brought to New York City. And there we erected these stones. And but a lot of the early methodologies that were really, or techniques that were really applied to artifacts like Greek urns and things of that nature, we were now applying on an architectural scale. So this is the oldest mausoleum in America. And here you can see where there are sort of blank elements. That's cast stone infill that was used to replace missing elements in stone, but rather than carving in the hieroglyphics, the piece was left blank and the eye was allowed to read the missing elements. As the same with the scarab above, this missing piece of stone is attached to a backup contemporary material. And as I was saying earlier, we basically dry laid everything. We were working in the basement of the museum before bringing it up to the main hall where it was to be erected. And here you can see the pieces of a column being pieced together and some plugs, wedges keeping the balance so that we would be able to later to fill in with the missing elements with a poured in place cementitious material. And here you see the museum, the temple installed. This is St. Paul's Chapel, and this would be a good example of the same means and methods and technologies applied to a contemporary, well, not a contemporary, but a American structure. And this is looking up at the columns that we were restoring. And as part of the restoration, this would be an example of a patching material, and here we're looking at color samples. Brownstone is extremely difficult because it's so variegated in its coloring. To be able to get a good matching takes a little bit of time and talent, shall we say. And then there are Dutchmen. In this case, we were able to have the same Belleville sandstone that we found in a salvage yard. And here the centerpiece is a carved section of fluting in the column, and you can see the original material next to it. And of course, one is more soiled and the other is fresh. Here we're in the field removing the deteriorated stone. There's one of our stone carvers, Yuri. And on the left-hand side, you see the white plaster. And because this was all hand carved originally in the 1776, every flute is different. So you have to cast so that your new piece will literally match the old piece. There's nothing that's been milled. And here you see Yuri actually carving based on the plaster model. And one of the wonderful things, having gone to Columbia University in their preservation program, we were exposed to the handbooks that were used at the time of the building in the late 1700s of craftsmen's books that they literally built from pattern books. And so this was the rules by James Gibbs, and these were the rules that actually these columns were designed to. So when we created our shop drawings, we were able to quite meticulously understand and replicate the moldings that were originally there. And here you see us doing the dry laying that we did at the temple in the Stoneworks, only this half on behalf of St. Paul's. And here you see the pieces installed as you would see them today. This building is the Home Life Insurance Building by Lebrun Architects, Lebrun and Sons. Let's just say circa 1893, because it was built over a period in their stuff. It's a Tuckahoe marble building, quite exquisite. It is a significant building, not only architecturally, but because it is an extension of City Hall. So rather than City Hall, we're very fortunate that our City Hall remains at the same scale and the same use. But because our government has obviously grown, instead of building up or out, the city has expanded its campus. And so now this building is part of that campus. And here, the Tuckahoe marble, Washington Square Arch is made of Tuckahoe marble. People probably know that structure, which we conserved many years ago. And here you can see the brownish color that there's iron in the Tuckahoe marble, which discolors it, or one could say gives it a patina over time. But here these marble balusters were so deteriorated that they really needed to be replaced. They were not safe. So what we did is we made a plaster cast of an existing, and then we did sketches, you can see that to the left, of what the profile undeteriorated would have looked like. And then we had we had several carvers, and each of the balusters were different, although they were to the same design, they were carved by different people. And so we had all the balusters carved by different people. So we were sort of able to be as authentic as possible in the replication. And here you see the process of outlining and carving. And again, here we are dry laying them at the Stoneworks prior to reinstalling them in the field. And so here we're looking at the Fountain of Life at the Bronx Botanical Garden. And this is a fun project. Two used methodologies and techniques that we used at, say, the National Maine Monument. And what we did is we looked for historic photographs because the merman and mermaid, which are in the lower left-hand side of the photograph, had been stolen, and nobody knows where they are. So we were asked to recreate them, and what we did is we commissioned a fine art sculptor who we found through the National Sculpture Society, Glenn Hines, and we had worked with Elliot Goldfinger at the National Monument also, who we found through the National Sculpture Society. My father was one of the early members, corporate members, because he knew that we would be needing fine artists to work on projects. And so he thought that was great that they were available to us. And so the sculptor then recreated from the historic photographs in clay the missing elements. We then had them cast in bronze at the Modern Art Foundry, who are on the board of the National Sculpture Society. And here you see the pieces in situ. We also continue to do contemporary monuments, and some of them for very tragic reasons. This is the Flight 587 in the Rockaways. And you can see the piece. This is also a dry laid monument. Again, dry lay is a meticulously difficult thing because between the stones, when you have mortar, you can sort of adjust things and you have a little more flexibility. When you're dry laid, you've got to be very, very exact. And in the foreground, towards the beach, is the existing 1960s mosaic that had been installed. And as the project got underway, there was we wound up engaging this mosaic. And so I did a conservation treatment report, which this would be an excerpt from, for the Public Design Commission. So over time, we've worked not only with private clients, but with the city and then with all the design review agencies. And these projects, although they may not seem to be that complex, can actually grow to be rather inclusive. So here, this is this 1960s mosaic, which is made of crockery and found items and the like. And so we needed to understand that, the acrylics and what the infill materials would be and what the paints would be. And here, portions of it were just disassembled for future use, we don't know where, but brought back to the Parks Department. But you also do fine art crating as a result. And so you wind up using the ethofoam and all the various conservation crating materials. Here's something that everyone watching will like, Columbus Monument, Columbus Circle. This is by Gaio Rutano, and he was an Italian sculptor. And it's interesting, Attio Piccirilli is an Italian-American sculptor. Gaio Rutano was actually in Italy, sculpted the piece in Rome. And Il Progresso was the group that organized the funding of this. And so it's interesting that some Italians were very much wanting to use it, sculptors from Italy, and other projects were interested in having people who were here in America from Italy. But I digress. Anyway, so here we did the conservation of this project, interestingly, in tandem with a, I think it was 2012, art project by Tatsu Nichi, sponsored by the Public Design Fund, where this particular contemporary sculptor, this is, I think, rediscovering Columbus, or no, discovering Columbus, that's it. The idea was to encase the statue in a room which would be accessible to the public through this amazing scaffolding, which we did not design, but was quite a work of art. And in conjunction with the Parks Department permitting the design to go ahead, they asked in return that the conservation be sponsored by the PDF. And we were awarded the commission to do the conservation. And so, here you see Mr. Nichi in the room, and the idea of this kind of surreal scale to it's like a 19-something living room. Anyway, so when the exhibit was done, we were able to inhabit the room in a climate-controlled environment, which is almost unheard of at this scale or at this height above a city street. And so here you're looking at what they call a Rylam tube test, which is really where you're simulating the pressure of a wind-driven rain over a period of 5 minutes, and how much water absorption is there, helping us to deduce or understand the pathology of the deterioration, and how much is water contributing, how much water is getting in, that kind of thing. And then in addition, we were doing biocide cleaning tests because there are a lot of microbial elements at this elevated height of about 4 stories, 5 stories. Here, after picking the biocide, we're I actually happen to be doing this, but if you can imagine, you're doing a monument with a toothbrush scale of cleaning, and that's literally what you are doing. And then, of course, you can't always do everything with just one type of cleaning. Here we're doing some water misting. The majority of the cleaning was with micro abrasives, where this is a marble. And so we were using very fine marble as the abrasive, so that we were just like with like, basically, is a good rule of thumb. And then documentation of the process. This is what they would call a grayscale, so that over time, this picture can be used to compare with how much surface soiling there has been, so that you get a true sense of the color. Gaetano Russo also did the design the marble, the bronze, and he cast them in Italy. And here we are removing the wax buildup and the former acrylic coatings so that we can repatinate. And here we're doing a warm patina. And the Parks Department and the Public Design Commission are all integrally involved with the approval process so that everyone is satisfied with what the end result is going to look like. And here's one of my favorites, Abbas El Kordi. He's my sister Sally's and Mohammed El Kordi's son. He's our fourth generation, and he's starting the way we all do, which is starting from the bottom up or hands-on to ultimately having to do things that you do as treasurer and all. And this is another example of the Central Park Police Precinct. It transfers headquarters. This was formerly the stables during the time of Olmsted and Locks. That's what they were designed as. And over the years, because it's a transverse road, there's a lot of salt spray and things of that nature, and slush, and the sandstone really deteriorated, and you can see where it's eroded and falling back. And the Parks Department used brick to stabilize the structure. I don't know why, but that's the truth. Anyway, and here you see us taking back the original stones. And since they were of sufficient depth, you'll see a red line going horizontally. That was determined to be the sound substrate. So we are basically removing the decayed stone, and then we'll refinish it to the original finished pattern. As part of our work also, we need to replicate things like mortars. And so what we'll do is send them out to a laboratory where they'll dissolve them in acid, measure the amount of fines or aggregate, and by weight determine the amount of cementitious material or lime material that's in the mortar. And then also to look at the granular size of the aggregates to replicate it as well. And that became, in this instance, the pointing mortar recipe, which you can see the repointing here. The Moynihan Station, which is something everybody knows, being reconfigured now as a public use building as well as transportation hub. And what we did here is we removed all of the cheek walls and stone from the original building, again, brought it back to the Stoneworks for cleaning and cutting as necessary to accommodate new structures that were being made. And now we're getting close to Lisa Ackerman's favorite subject. This is the Prospect Park Peristyle in Brooklyn. And it is an interesting structure because for a petite structure, it's only one story, it has quite a melange of materials. And we have terracotta capitals and terracotta frieze. Then we have marble columns. And then if you see in the center, there's someone working up on the ceiling, that's Ottavino tile. And the reason we like a project like this is because we use this as one of our internship projects for high school students, is that in the span of a summer, they can actually experience all the facets of the project and really learn how it was built and what is being destroyed over time, and how things go about being replicated. And in this instance, the really wonderful story that I only got to hear because of a news report caster came to the site and is interviewing the children, and I should say students, and who are the interns for the summer. And Justin Hilliard, excuse me, I have to put on my glasses to see if I can see who's who. Okay, this is Justin over here. Justin is asked by the narrator, I guess, the newscaster, so Justin, what did you learn this summer? And Justin said, well, I like to paint. And I realized working here, you can paint with landscape. I thought, wow, that was worthwhile. Not literally preservation, but a wonderful thing for him. And then one of the other students, I think, Jose, who might be here. So Jose, oh, he's the far left on the bottom left row of pictures. When he was asked, well, what did you learn this summer? He said, well, I found out how beautiful marble is, and when you graffiti it and have to paint over it, what a loss that is, that you can no longer see the stone itself. And I was like, wow, well, let's hope you tell that to your friends or anyone else you might know. But anyway, that's an example of the project. So I'm learning at the same time the students are, which is always a privilege. And I'm going to conclude with the Ottavino family monument. It's designed by my father as a baldacchino with a stele in the center, which has this is the maquette that he had made before we actually built the piece. And this is my grandfather, Adamo Ottavino, who passed away in 1958, the year before I was born. But anyway, so that's our conclusion, and I hope that you'll ask some questions about things I'm sure I left out, and I hope I'll be able to answer them. So thank you, Lisa.